Hello everyone! Let's talk about the Daimajin Trilogy. I attempted to do this review in December as a little present for those of you who have been patiently waiting, so I rented the DVD set that was distributed by AD Vision Inc. in 2002. But either I'm dumb and couldn't figure out the menu, or there was no option to turn on the subtitles. Since watching the three movies in Japanese with no idea what people were saying was out of the question, although I think my mom was game, and the image quality wasn't very good anyway, I decided to shelve this project, returned the set, and chose to review Warning from Space instead. That ended up being a lot of fun, so I'm not sorry things turned out that way. And then after a break for the holidays, I rented my Plan B, Mill Creek Entertainment's 2012 Blu-ray release, and that worked. Could I have saved myself all the bother and just watched the movies on YouTube? Yes, I could have. I didn't think of it at the time, but that is a possibility. However, I think the Blu-ray quality is superior. I never heard of the Daimajin Trilogy until I did my Godzilla review series, and then people started bringing up other Japanese giant monster things I should look at. Not that this has a giant monster per se, but it is about a giant destructive being played by a man in a suit, so close enough. I have had 9 people recommend this trilogy since 2018, and one of you has brought it up 4 times, so I hope this review meets your expectations. The Daimajin trilogy is comprised of 3 films released by Daiei in 1966. They were made almost simultaneously, but released one at a time in April, August, and December of that year. They shared the same producer, same writer, same composer, same editor, same director of photography, but each one had a different director. The casts, characters, and plots are all different, but the stories have many themes and concepts in common, and they're all set in the Edo or Tokugawa period of Japanese history. Each movie could be summarized the same way. A giant stone idol comes to life to rescue devout peasants and wreak vengeance on those who have cruelly enslaved them. The first film is titled Daimajin and was directed by Kimiyoshi Yasuda. It was released in the US as Majin the Monster of Terror. Geological unrest throws villagers into a panic, for they believe the Majin trapped in the nearby mountain is trying to get out. As they pray to ward off the evil spirit, at the palace, a contingent of rebellious warriors use the chaos to stage a coup and oust their lord. One loyal samurai manages to escape with the lord's 2 children, and his aunt, who is also the Majin's priestess, leads them up the forbidden mountain to a place they can hide at the base of the Majin's statue. For 10 years, they thrive there, but down below, the villagers have been enslaved by the usurper, forced to do manual labor on a massive construction project. Under the new rule, the drivers abuse and oppress the suffering families. When the young lord and rightful heir learns this, he's outraged and determines he must fight to free his people. And he's not the only one who's angry. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I really liked this movie. Daimajin is well made, well acted, and has a compelling story. It is dark, though, and at times it can be spooky or tragic. At first it did seem heavy on feudal politics, but while I may not be well versed in the historical context, I know good guys versus bad guys, and that's basically what this is, with a strong dose of Japanese mysticism thrown in. I wondered if the Majin concept had roots in genuine mythology, an ancient way to explain events like thunderstorms and earthquakes, akin to the ancient Greeks with Zeus and his thunderbolts and Poseidon and his storms at sea. But when I looked it up, it seems like the concept really did originate with the Daiei films. Everything that came up was either about this or had something to do with Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z or whatever it is. So I'm not sure. I'm a little fuzzy on this point. I do know that a Majin is loosely defined as a god with supernatural abilities and some power over nature. I've seen the word Majin translated as demon god, and since the Dai in this context functions as a prefix, meaning large or giant, Daimajin equals giant god or giant demon god. What surprised me were what I perceived as parallels to Western religions in the stories and imagery. I saw many parallels to the Book of Exodus, where the Israelites are enslaved under Pharaoh in Egypt. You have the captive peasants forced to work, the young leader raised in the palace who later spends prolonged time in the wilderness. Then he returns to free his people, and the leader is warned of God's wrath if he doesn't let these people go. He ignores these warnings, and then he faces punishment. But it also called to mind the 16th century legend of the golem, a statue a rabbi made out of mud or clay and brought to life via magic to protect the oppressed Jews of Prague. There are moments in the film that are very exciting, like when one of the bad guys drives a huge nail into the statue's forehead. Blood starts running down its face, and a storm erupts. The effects are good, and this whole climactic part of the film is a great spectacle. And it's not afraid to make you wait. Contrary to how things typically go in kaiju movies, the Daimajin doesn't really arrive until the film's finale. When it does transform into flesh and blood, it's quite impressive and a little scary. The Daimajin has green skin, a cleft chin, modeled after Kirk Douglas, glaring angry eyes, and an intimidating stance. He kind of reminded me of that giant, mean-looking statue that comes to life in Jason and the Argonauts. To be honest, I was surprised that the design and the effects were so good, since this is Daiei, the studio that made the Gamera movies. With all due respect, the Gamera monsters tend to be stiff and clunky and easy to laugh at, but the Daimajin's movements are much smoother, and it does help that he's on screen much less. The Daimajin wears a full suit of armor, and I love that when he first appears, the nail is still sticking out of his helmet. Of course, at the end, we find out why, and it's very satisfying. This is definitely a being you would want on your team. The Daimajin seems undefeatable and never loses its cool. Retribution is swift and complete. Well, it's swift once someone offers their own life as a sacrifice. That seems to be the key to getting a fast response, even faster if you shed a tear. The movie doesn't shy away from violence. It's as much a samurai movie as it is a giant being movie. The priestess's fate is especially startling, and I am going to spoil this part a little bit. It's not gory, but the movie doesn't spare the viewer much. She gains an audience with the bad guys and warns them to stop their atrocities, lest they invoke the wrath of God. The Lord laughs her off and then declares that he's going to destroy the statue, and then he strikes her. But each time he slashes at her in a rage, she gathers herself back up to face him, cursing him until she has no breath left. It's prolonged and impressively shot. I like how the background turns black when he first strikes her. That really heightens the drama. By the way, our friend Akira Ifukube wrote the music for this one. He did reuse at least one theme from the score he wrote for Toho's Frankenstein Conquers the World the year before, and I recognized it immediately, so when I saw his name in the main titles, I said, I knew it! So I thought this was a really good film. It moves quickly, it has tight editing, smooth camera work, and concise storytelling. The protagonists are sympathetic and likable, with understandable dilemmas, and the acting tends to be subtle and nuanced. It's good stuff. The second film is titled Return of Daimajin, or Daimajin Ikaru, and it's directed by Kenji Misumi. In this one, there's one mean clan that lives on a barren mountain and enslaves people, and two peaceful, prosperous clans that welcome their refugees. They are situated near a place called God's Island, the home of a Majin statue. When a group goes there to pray, they're dismayed to see the statue's face turn red, a sign of coming doom. Sure enough, the clans find themselves double-crossed and invaded from without and within. Just a handful of faithful people are left to fight the bad guys, but they can't do it alone. This is another quality movie with a compelling story. Not as compelling, I thought. The first movie had such a gripping start. It had the ominous earthquake and ensuing fear and chaos, and then sudden violence. The sequel, on the other hand, begins with violence, as evil samurai capture a band of fleeing villagers and slay any who try to evade them, but then it slows down. This is also how I learned how similar the stories are from one movie to the next. Not that that's a bad thing, just be prepared for some repetition. Composer Akira Ifukube uses many of the same themes. All the films feature conflict between believers and those who scoff at their god and dismiss threats of his vengeance. And in the first two films, the wealthy, noble samurai lords are overthrown by greedy, villainous samurai, and the villagers make unsuccessful attempts to help their lords, and there are various noisy, chaotic melees. The fights are pretty quick, but very dramatic, lots of yelling, and exciting things happen with the statue as well, including a decapitation. Where the first film was based on a mountain, this one revolves around water, which the Majin has control over, making it boil, turn red, and even swallow up the bad guy's boat. Not to keep bringing up Greek mythology references, but that scene reminded me of Scylla and Charybdis from Homer's Odyssey. I notice in these movies that while the good guys do catch a break sometimes, it seldom lasts. They might succeed with a plan, but the bad guys are soon onto them. They go out there, they're executing their idea, and then bam, the bad guys are right around the corner and they apprehend them. It's almost like the good guys are so virtuous that they fail at being sneaky. Or maybe the bad samurai are just that cunning, which makes it seem like the villagers' plight really is hopeless, and divine intervention is the only thing that can save them. That's certainly the case here, where the Daimajin comes to the rescue at the most perilous moment. The execution scene has shades of Christian martyrdom, there's some cross or crucifixion imagery, and then when the Daimajin wants to get somewhere fast, instead of turning into a ball of fire like in the first movie, it just parts the water, and it looks exactly like Moses parting the Red Sea in the Ten Commandments. I think it's interesting that each movie adds a few new abilities to this god's roster. It enhances his unpredictability and the apparent limitlessness of his power. He's able to send a fireball skimming across the water, and one guy, I don't know what happened, either I missed something, or he just was mysteriously smited on the spot. And of course, the movie ends with another stroke of poetic justice. I did like the first movie better. I wasn't thrilled when this followed so many of the same plot points while not being as engaging. But of the three, I think this one concludes with the most hopeful message. The third film, directed by Kazuo Mori, is known as Wrath of Daimajin, but the version I watched said the title was Daimajin Strikes Again. There is some confusion over the titles having to do with one of the movies being misnamed in its US release, and there was a little bit of a switcheroo with the second and the third movie. To me, it doesn't help that that Return of Daimajin's Japanese title is Daimajin Ikaru, and Ikari means anger or wrath, so it could be translated as the Wrath of Daimajin, but it wasn't, it's Return of Daimajin. And then Wrath of Daimajin's Japanese title is Daimajin Gyakushu, and as I learned from all those Godzilla titles, Gyakushu means counterattack. But sometimes, when they come up with the titles for the American release, they translate it as Revenge or Return. So it could have been Return of Daimajin instead of Wrath of Daimajin, or it could have been Daimajin Strikes Again. I don't know. This referred to it as Daimajin Strikes Again. IMDb calls it Wrath of Daimajin. I think I saw on Wikipedia and Wikizilla that they called it Wrath of Daimajin. Just to avoid any further problems, I am not going to refer to the film's title for the rest of this video. And if it ever comes up again, I'm just going to call it The Third One. A prologue shows the Daimajin causing all kinds of earthly turmoil and the villagers running in terror, not knowing why he's angry. A narrator then comes in to explain that this story is set in an ancient time when people believed storms and other disturbances were caused by an angry god. This threw me off at first because the previous films did not have a narrator. They really needed no explanation. And in fact, this narrator never returns. So it was odd. I don't know if this was something that this director insisted on, whereas the other two directors felt like, why would we do that? It just seemed like a random disembodied voice. Anyway, while on a logging trip, the men of a certain village are overtaken by a band of samurai who enslave them, dragging them to Hell's Valley, where they're forced to work in sulfur mines. One escapes to tell the villagers what happened, but while the peasants want to rescue their men, doing so requires crossing the Majin's mountain, which is forbidden territory. They are too fearful and pessimistic, but a group of little boys decide to make the journey themselves. What these kids think they'll be able to do if they successfully reach Hell's Valley is anyone's guess, but this new perspective makes for a refreshing change of pace, and this becomes more of an adventure film. But don't be fooled. Like its predecessors, this movie does not shy away from violence or death. I appreciated the diversity of landscapes here, and where the first one centered around a mountain, and the second one centered around water, this one centers around snow, particularly in its final act. Hey, that's how I can refer to this movie. It's the snow one. New lore has been added to spice things up. The Majin has an avatar now, a hawk that observes the boys and intervenes to save their lives. This was an interesting addition, although the effects for the dive-bombing hawk aren't great, probably the weakest effects in the entire trilogy. All of the boys were likable, but my favorite was little Sugi, the younger brother that's told to stay home because he's too small for the dangerous trip. I was pleased, but not surprised, when he showed up later, and twice he turns out to be the group's greatest asset. I loved this kid. He's cute, but he's also brave, stealthy, and good with a bow and arrow. Despite appearances, though, I wouldn't label this as a little kids movie. The content hasn't been toned down for small children. There's a disorienting scene in the woods that mirrors a similar sequence in the first movie, the one where Take wanders around and has scary hallucinations. Hell's Valley is aptly named, and yep, it's a safe bet that at some point someone will fall into the boiling yellow pool. One kid offers himself as a sacrifice to the Majin and jumps off a cliff. And there's one thing the movie had the nerve to do that kind of shocked me. I thought for sure that the Daimajin would work a little magic or something to undo it, or that it would turn out, oh, this happened all along. But no, it happened, it really happened, and it stayed as having happened. Akira Ifukube wrote another good, moody score for this one, and I kind of feel that overall this has the best score of the three. But there's a theme from the first two that I missed here, so I can't really commit to that. There are also some cues that sound very like music from the first Godzilla movie, so you half expect him to come stomping around the corner. This one is a few minutes longer than the first two, and I could tell. At a certain point, the big battle seems to go into overtime, and I was thinking, end already! But it's yet another fine quality film with an engaging story and likable characters. It has moments of levity, which the others lack, but it also has a more bittersweet ending, considering all that was lost. Just as the other movies don't shy away from violence, this one doesn't shy away from harsh realities and consequences. I really enjoyed watching this trilogy, and so did my mom, and I understand now why everybody who recommended it talked it up so much. Without question, I would say the first one's the best, but after that, I think I would probably rank the third one in second place, but that's not to say that the second film isn't good. It's also a satisfying watch, and I would say that number 2 and number 3 are essentially equal. So those are my thoughts on the Daimajin trilogy. I hope you enjoyed this video. I didn't go into much background information. I pretty much just stuck to sharing my own impressions, but there are lots of fun facts out there, like the fact that the giant god was played by former baseball player Chikara Hashimoto. Those are his glaring bloodshot eyes you see as the Daimajin devises the most fitting comeuppance for evil overlords. So if you have any fun facts you'd like to share, or if you just want to express your own opinion on these movies, go ahead and do so in the comments below. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say about this trilogy, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching!